All right, you may have heard the dogs in the background once again. Making these videos in the home setting is always exciting. So this is part two, but we'll pick up with this idea of onset rhyme. Really, it's just the initial phoneme task and then recognizing that there's something else that comes. So sh, ip. Of course, ip is really a medial and final phoneme. But at this point, we just know that there's something else, the rhyme. All right, the next step would be the final phoneme. So in our ship example, knowing that the last sound in ship is p. And yet a little bit more challenging for kids is catching that medial sound. And of course, what's difficult there is that there are sounds on either side of it that are co-articulating. So it's harder to pull that out and hear it. So that would be saying ship. What's in the middle of ship? Eh. That would be the medial sound. Okay. Now, the next level is full phoneme segmentation, and the flip side of that, blending. So being able to take that word cat and give me the sounds k, a, t, or take the phonemes and blend it into the word cat. So this level, initial, critical in early kindergarten for really learning the letter sounds. Letter sound instruction doesn't make sense to the kid who cannot hear the initial sounds in words. This is the big money level though, right? This is where we get into our decoding, our encoding, and even into developing automatic word recognition. So this is always the target, the final target for instruction. All right, let's move on to point three, which is assessment. Now, you could really assess at each of these levels, okay? And maybe in some sort of careful intervention case that might make sense. I think it, practically speaking, that it really makes sense to assess kids for initial phoneme. We've already said that's what's critical for learning letter sounds, and the reason that it's helpful to assess for it in early kindergarten is that there may be a lot of students who cannot provide full phoneme segmentation. For most kids, they will not produce that until it's been taught to them. And so assessing full phoneme segmentation in the beginning of kindergarten won't necessarily differentiate between your kids who are really struggling and kids who simply haven't been taught to perform that task. But initial phoneme is a great thing to assess. I simply have a set of words, maybe I have 10 words, and I say, hey, Johnny, tell me the first sound you hear in zoo. And of course, Johnny should say z. What's the first sound you hear in jam? J, and so forth. And now, what's interesting is, of course, you'll have kids who cannot do that. And they'll act like they don't really know what you're talking about because they don't really. They don't know there's a first sound in jam. And so a lot of times it'll be, Johnny, what's the first sound you hear in jam? And Johnny will say, jam. Because he cannot pull those sounds apart and recognize that there's one at the beginning. Okay? Next, I would go to full phoneme segmentation, and you'll read about that assessment in Randy O'Connor's chapter. So, a short set of 2 or 3 phoneme words. So here's our dog, our cat, our map, and so forth. And I say, Johnny, what are the sounds you hear in map? What are the sounds? Can you pull them? Let's break them apart and give me each one. So Johnny's response should be app. Again, a kid who doesn't have that awareness, a lot of times will just say map, or they'll stretch it out, map. That's not the same as segmenting those sounds. Or maybe they'll say map. I get that a lot. First sound, they can do the initial task, but they don't hear what's left, and so they go back to the full word. So now, Randy O'Connor will mention, and it seems to be important, that kids can not only give us app, but can do it fairly proficiently. You know, it's a little bit different if I say, what are the sounds in map? And a kid goes, and so it's a very effortful, very lengthy process versus the kid who can go Obviously, we want that sort of more proficient, more automatic segmentation. And so that brings a timed element into phoneme segmentation assessment. And so you'll read in Randy O'Connor's book, 10 3-phoneme words, so a possibility of 30 phoneme segmentations in a minute. Can you do 28? Can you do 30 in a minute? And that is a very powerful assessment, especially after kids have had, of course, some instruction and some practice in phoneme segmentation. All right, that's really what the assessment piece covers. And again, you start to see this is really kindergarten stuff. I'd like for even first grade teachers not have to think about phoneme awareness. Let's get her done in poke terms in kindergarten, because this is really the foundation, and there's no reason why kids can't be successful in kindergarten. Okay, let's turn to instruction. Now, several points I want to make here. The first one is, what do we teach? What is the phonemic awareness curriculum? Again, you could go back to the levels of phoneme awareness and teach initial sound, teach onset and rhyme, teach final, teach medial, teach full phoneme. And again, maybe in a particular case with a real struggler, we might have to break it down into those individual steps. However, if you think about it, if you're teaching the kid, if a kid can do initial phoneme segmentation in cat, and you're also teaching final, well, you've already broken apart those two. In essence, you've broken apart the medial sound as well. So what I actually recommend for people is to start with that initial sound, okay? That initial sound, and that's a very easy kind of instruction. You'll see that we'll recommend some sort of manipulative, some sort of movement or token to actually touch to help kids. But for my class from the fall, you'll remember the sort of stretch and segment. So I might say, kids, put your hands to your mouth, and we're going to grab the word map like we would grab a piece of gum and stretch it out. Okay, so we go map. And then I say, great. Now this time, I want you to stop at the beginning of the stretch. So we go Great. What's the first sound in map? And so we've taught them to sort of segment that initial sound. All right. Of course, we could use the same technique to get to the medial sound. Guys, let's stop in the middle of our stretch of map. Map. Oh, what sounds in the middle of map? Ah, and there it is. Let's get to the end of our stretch. Map. What do you hear at the end of map? Good. So the same sort of tool could be used for all of those. But once we have kids who can segment the initial phoneme, and that's critical early in kindergarten so we can teach the letter sounds effectively, then we want to get to this level of full phoneme segmentation. In the end, that's the money skill, right? That's what leads to the decoding and encoding of words in print. And, it sort of picks up along the way, the final and medial sounds. Okay? Then, as we'll see in Randy O'Connor's chapter 3, we're going to get to the level of full phoneme segmentation plus the addition of letters or letter sounds. And this is where phonemes and phonics actually blend and become the alphabetic principle. Okay? Now, the next point I want to make, and I just said it a second ago, is that phonemic awareness instruction, I would like it to be a solely kindergarten task. There is no reason why, 97 out of 100 kindergartners can't really master this and then be moving on. Have the foundation they need, and then on into first grade and later, just simply be reading and writing words. So the point is basically, get her done. Get her done if you're down there in kindergarten. This should be a critical focal skill for kindergarten teachers. They should be very good at teaching it. First grade teachers, yeah, they need this knowledge as well, because they're going to support strugglers who maybe didn't quite get it done in kindergarten or have relapsed a little bit over the summer. But really we're talking about, that foundational skill down in kindergarten and first grade. All right, the next point is these sort of qualities of effective phonemic awareness instruction. First, providing that very careful model. Because for kids who can't do this, well, it flat out doesn't make a lot of sense. And so we have to model it very carefully so they see what's involved. Second, you find that most effective phonemic awareness sort of instruction and interventions have some sort of manipulative or visual dimension to it. Like my stretching of the gum. There's a very visual and even sort of motor skill kind of dimension to it, right? And we'll see a few others in just a second. Third, if you're dealing with struggling kids who struggle with this, who find this difficult, you can pretty much assume, right? If you're in a 1 to 18 kindergartner setting and you're trying to get kids to do this very detailed work of segmenting sounds, forget it. Let's say my Johnny, who struggles, is back there in the back row and we're trying to very carefully move tokens to represent sounds. He's not doing it. Not in that 1 to 18 where I'm not right on top of him, watching closely and sort of giving him some very careful feedback, right? So certainly by the time we're talking about working with kids who are a little bit weak in this area and struggling, we need to get into a pretty small group, a 3-to-1 type thing, where I can really watch and make sure they're doing the detailed work that is phoneme segmentation and blending. All right, let me show you a couple things that I hope illustrate these kinds of principles. Okay, so we've already done it with initial segmentation, the stretching of the gum. Here is the class, and again, my class, this should look familiar, and this is the kind of thing you'll see in Rolando Connor's chapters, the say it and move it activity. Very classic. Again, let's take our cat, and we say, kids, we are going to say each sound in the word cat, and as we say it, we're going to move the token up into the box. Now look, 3 boxes, there's going to be 3 sounds in cat. Start with your token that's under the star, so we get them from the very beginning, going left to right. All right, kids, watch me. Here's my very careful model. I'm going to say cat very slowly and try and pull apart those sounds, and as I say each sound, I'm going to move my token. K, a, t. Now, go back to your star, and let's blend them together to make the word cat. All right, now it's your turn, and so forth. Okay, there's my careful model. In the beginning, we'll probably do it. You guys do it with me. Let's all try it together. K, a, t. There's my sort of careful support. Now, guaranteed, again, if this is new for kids, you're going to have kids who are going to do things like this. Cat, cat. Now I have to provide that sort of careful feedback, and I have to say, ooh, no, let's go back to that first token. Just k. Can you just make that first sound? K, and so forth. So I really have to support this. Okay, the manipulatives help, but I still need to intervene, because I guarantee you'll have kids who will do something like just that. Cat, or maybe they've got k, at. And either they're confused when they get to this one, or they'll do it again. Cat. Something like that. All right? Now, we've seen both our initial and our full level. Now let's look at full plus letters. What I like to do is something like this. I give 2 tokens. I give 2 or 3 letters that we know and we've learned the sounds for, and I say, kids, we're going to do our say it and move it again with our 3 sound words. But this time, we've got letters that are going to stand for one of the sounds. So when you hear that letter sound, we're not going to move the token. We're actually going to choose the letter that makes that sound, and we're going to say and move it. So how about our word map? What do you hear at the beginning of map? M. Okay, put it out there at the beginning. Now we're going to say it and move it for map, but we're going to use our letter instead. So we go ap. Super. All right, put them down. Now, how about when I say the word cat? What do you hear at the end of cat? And notice how I don't always go to the initial phoneme. That's what kids can do the best. That's what they hear first. So sometimes we want to push them and we want to go to the end. Okay, great. Cat, let's say it and move it for cat. T. What's our word? Cat. Super. Okay, so you can come back to me. So this is that 3rd level of phoneme instruction, which is full phoneme segmentation and blending with the addition of letters. Now it becomes a task of not just blending and segmenting the phonemes, but also recognizing the alphabetic principle. Those sounds that we're playing with in words, that's what those letters mean. They represent those sounds, and I can replace that sound with that letter. Now, people ask me all the time, hey, is it helpful to get to, having all of the letters out there? And so when I say it and move it for cat with letters, should I have C-A-T? Nothing wrong with that, but it appears in research that it's sufficient to just have one letter in there to recognize, that's what's going on. The letters actually are working to make those sounds in speech. And from here, we can jump into actual word reading and writing tasks. All right, so there is our model, our manipulative, and this time the tokens and the letters, or it could be that visual of stretching out a word, and that chance for very careful feedback. All right, that is from research and from my experience what makes for powerful phoneme awareness instruction. Let me leave you with this. If we do this well and we do it early, we don't really have to do a lot of it. When I first got to Wyoming, and I talked a lot about phonemic awareness because 15 years ago, most teachers in the state probably didn't even know what it meant. And people kind of had a little bit different philosophy, a little more whole language, holistic stuff, and they didn't see the point of this very detailed work. And so sometimes they'd say, here comes Patrick, all he's going to do is talk about phonemic awareness and phonics. Here comes Patrick the phonicator. And I tell them, folks, yes, I am talking about this because it is a critical foundational skill for reading and writing words. But I'm not trying to take over your entire curriculum. We're talking about maybe 10 hours of instruction in kindergarten, and then it's done. No one else after that really has to revisit phonemic awareness because kids are off reading and writing. That leads me to another crucial point. Once kids can do this, the focus needs to be on reading and writing words. Because, you don't pass any tests, you don't get into college by being able to go k-at. It's simply a stepping stone. It's a foundational skill that we build reading and writing skills on. So once they can do this, we leave it behind, and our focus is on decoding words and spelling words. There's no need to keep working at it once they've got it. All right, so you'll read more about this in greater detail in the Randy O'Connor book. We will, actually, I think there's a healthy kind of balance because the Luceau chapters this week, kind of look at things from the other side, more vocabulary and the meaning-driven side. This is obviously very code-focused. So in terms of code or meaning, the readings kind of balance each other out. Okay, so I'll check out your responses to the O'Connor work in phonemic awareness. You can guarantee that some of this kind of stuff will be on our quizzes in terms of phonemic awareness, or our quiz this week in phonemic awareness, and we'll come back to it in the threaded discussion. If you have questions about what I've said or what you've seen, that's your great chance to ask, and I'll be very active in the discussion trying to answer anything that you guys pose. All right, have a great week. Remember, full week. You could start on Sunday, don't have to. You could start on Monday with the reading, but the response and quiz are coming up quick, so make sure you stick with the due dates there. All right, have a great week, and I'll see you in Module 3.